Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Last First Date Radio, featuring interviews with experts in dating, relating, and mating in midlife. And now, here's your host, Sandy Weiner.
This is episode number 381, 3 Tips to Eliminate Your Limitations Once and for All with Sylvia Puentes. We are excited to bring you this topic because it's amazing how many limitations we have. We're not even aware of them most of the time. So we're going to get into it in just a few minutes. But first I want to say hi, I'm Sandy Weiner, and welcome to Last First Date Radio, where we believe it is never too late for love and that a woman of value naturally attracts the respect and rewards that she desires and deserves in life and love. What is a woman of value? She's somebody who shows up, stands up, and speaks up. She knows her value. She knows how to set boundaries. She knows how to ask for what she wants, and she knows how to receive it. Every week I bring you a tip on how to become a woman of value, and this week's tip is love is your birthright. Often we think, I don't deserve love, or I came from such a messed up background that I will not have love because it's not in the cards for me. And I want any of you who really think that to understand that it is everyone's birthright to have love, to receive it, to give it. And so if you come up with that thought and that limiting belief over and over, please try and change that inner dialogue to love is my birthright, love is my birthright. And so that's my challenge to you this week, is change that inner dialogue to a positive inner dialogue, and I can pretty much guarantee you that things will start to shift. Before I bring on our guest, Sylvia Puentes, I want to ask if you would like to join my free Facebook group. It's called Your Last First Date, and it's for women over 40 who are ready to take on a positive look at dating at this stage in life. It is a very, very forward-moving group. We don't allow people to just vent and complain about dating, about men. And there are people in relationships who are in the group too, so people who have found relationships as the group started and continued. We're about 4 years into the group. We have about 3,000 women, and we are heavily monitored so that everything is really just kept in line, as opposed to a lot of other singles groups out there that are completely off the rails. So I'm very proud of this group that I created 4 years ago. Would love to have you join. It's called Your Last First Date. And now for my guest, Sylvia Puentes. She is an international speaker and author, and she has a passion for transformational coaching and empowered education. Her career as an educator spans nearly 20 years and has taken her from elementary school classrooms to private coaching and bilingual corporate training. She has developed a range of unique and inspiring workshops and programs, including the Academic and Parent Coaching Program, which has helped youth, parent, and teachers find alternative methods to inspire and rediscover the joy of learning. She's also a certified facilitator for Right Voice for You, a special program by Access Consciousness. Welcome to the show, Sylvia.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here. Especially
Thank you.
during the holidays.
Yeah, it's nice to have a guest who shows up on the day before Christmas.
Exactly.
We don't have a show scheduled for next week when it's going to be New Year's, but I'm really happy to have you on the show and also to talk about limitations. And before we get there, I would love to know what brought you to this work. Like what's important about limitations and how we see them?
It's so interesting. When you're growing up and kind of even looking at my life, you just kind of grow up and everything seems normal, right? What you see, how your family is and relatives and the world, it all just kind of seems that that's what it is. That's what's true. And I recall a memory. It might have been, I don't know, maybe even 4 or 5. But I remember a quiet moment to myself, which was really rare, growing up in a home of 5 girls, sitting outside and kind of looking up to the sky. And the best way I can describe it, it's like I knew there was more. And as a kid, all I could think of was the circus, high, tall people on their stilts. I thought, God, I know there's more. But I kind of laugh about that. And at the same time, it's like, what do we know as kids that, we're still searching for in a sense today, that because of what we see and we think that that's it, that's our greatest limitation, that we're going by what we see, what people have role modeled, what other people are choosing, what people are saying. And, I never knew that I was a seeker. And I remember when I came to my first Access Consciousness class, there was all these different questions being asked. And I remember asking the founder, Gary Douglas, going, well, what if your life's okay? Like, in my world, I didn't think I had a problem. I didn't think there was anything to fix. And the one question he asked me to continue to ask has transformed my entire life. And that is, how does it get any better than this? Because that actually goes beyond what's in front of you to continually to open the doors to new possibilities, new discoveries. And it has invited me to venture out now around the world, facilitating classes, contributing also as a regional event coordinator for the Americas for Access Consciousness now as well. But it's really empowering people to know you do know. There is down, I say down deep because we think it's deep within us, but there's this sense we do know what's true. We do know what we desire, and we rarely are asking ourselves that question and being willing to be uncomfortable because it might not match what we thought it was, and it might not match what other people are asking for. So,
how does it get any better than this? So, it's an interesting question because a lot of people can say, well, shouldn't you be happy with what you have?
I've heard that a lot. Yes, definitely.
Right. That's right. So they say, like in Hebrew, there's a Jewish term, who is rich, a person who's happy with what they have. So how do we make sense of that in the sense of, do we always need more and more and more? Like, in what sense do we need more?
Well, it's amazing because, there is, we talk a lot about gratitude, and I definitely am grateful. I mean, the sun came out today, and you open up the window, and it heats up a space there, and I was like, I am so grateful. I get out of the shower, and I'm just like, I can actually shout, it's like, I love hot water, but there's this sense of being grateful, like, yes, being grateful for what is so, and that's being grateful of the good, bad, and ugly. Oftentimes we're only waiting for the good to be grateful for, but it's like, what if we could be grateful for everything, because it invites us to continue to choose something else. So it's not dismissing what's so, but I'm like, for me, this new question that I started to play with almost 10 years ago, how does it get any better than this? And what else is possible? Which are two of the, I would say, the first questions that people, as they discover Access Consciousness, begin to play with. What else is possible? And I like to add, what else is possible I've never considered? Because that takes me out of my limitations, my thoughts, anything I can imagine, it takes me way beyond that. So what else is possible here beyond what I've ever considered possible? And then, how does it get any better than this? So, and this is where, like, if we are, especially nowadays, if we're truly going to create a greater planet, I mean, we see so many things going on, climate change and multiple things in different countries and all this stuff. But if we're truly going to create something different, we need to go, my sense is we need to go beyond what we've already concluded and decided is good or bad, and a solution to actually create something different. And that we can look at it in relationship to our kids, in relationship to our partners, in relationship to friends. Like, if something's not working, I mean, what else is possible I've never considered? And the gift of asking that question and not looking for the answer, it's almost a sense of like, all right, universe, and if you believe in God, all right, God, like whatever it is, but it's like, okay, what else is possible here I've never considered? And just give it space and go throughout your day and see what else shows up. But it's almost like the willingness to open up that door to a different possibility. And I think one of the things that people challenge themselves the most with or have more difficulty is that we so quickly want to look for an answer. And what if it's not finding an answer, but allowing yourself to to go through your day and go, okay, what else is possible? And then you might hear something, see something that otherwise, because of your conclusion that, nothing else is going to work, this is it, you've closed all, even the capacity to hear or see.
Right.
That could change with that question, yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think so many people also don't think the answer lies within. They look outside themselves for the answers. Right?
Sandy, yeah.
Yeah, I just saw something on cults, like a special on cults on Netflix, and it was all about people who just wanted to buy into somebody else's belief system to the point of being unhealthy. And so, yeah, what were you going to say about that?
Well, I experienced that. There came a point in my world where it's like, always, and again, I would have never called myself a seeker. And now that I speak about it, it's like, oh, I was always seeking. It was just kind of a subtle way, but it was always a sense that I knew there was more. When I was teaching in the elementary schools, it was that sense of like, okay, well, what else can we do? Like, I just saw that there was things we could do different. And then certain, No Child Left Behind came in place, and it became really challenging to create something new and not follow the structure of that program that came out to be implemented at all schools. So, but it was that sense of always knowing there was more. There was something else you said, and it just disappeared. Oh, but yes, I was searching. It seemed like someone could tell me, whether it was religion, whether it was, a class or a book, and there was always sense like someone had to tell me. I was looking for that as well. And what was so different for me with Access Consciousness was that, and even their tagline is empowering people to know that they know. And it was the first time I was asked, what is it that you know? I was like, I know something? What? That's news to me. And yet that question started to have me kind of look at, well, what do I know?
Yeah, and we know. It's just fascinating, and I think people want you to hand them a formula and a one size fits all. And one of the things that I talked before about my Facebook group is we don't allow people to talk about this is the way it is. This is what you should do. I really frown against that, and also it's like like with things like when should you have sex? Oh, only after 90 days, because that's what Steve Harvey said. It's like, and what happens if you want it sooner? And what happens if the other person totally loses interest because you've put all these rules in place? Are you listening to what you want, what works for you? And people it's too hard for most people to even go there because, when you have these limitless possibilities, it can feel really scary. So what happens when people are scared to choose?
Well, it's interesting. I was married for 17 years, got a divorce, and then was really single for about 6 years in the sense that, I would meet people, but it was never this long-term relationship. And it's funny, I started to discover what I was using to avoid actually creating something new, and it was that I was traveling the world. And so, I would hear it repeatedly from people. It's like, well, Sylvia, you couldn't possibly ever have a relationship because you're never in one place more than a week, and maybe two. And I didn't realize, I kind of said that, oh, I'm sure there's someone, and I kind of blew it off. And at the same time, I started to notice that was my greatest ammunition, that's actually that kept me from the vulnerability to actually ask myself what I desired. Because it seemed like an impossibility. And it's interesting because you're talking right now about like this fear or like, you're following certain rules. And for me, there's another way that I kind of sense it in my world. If something feels like work, like I'm having to work real hard at it, like it's not fun, then there's something not true there for me. Either I'm not being who I truly am and expressing myself how I am, or they're not, or something's not. But then I started to discover this lightness that started to show up in different places with girlfriends at work and stuff. It's like, oh, is that the energy of me? So I started to play with, like, what is that space? What does it feel like? What am I expressing, what am I doing, just to notice when do I feel the most new. And then as I started to be more aware of that energy, it's like anytime I encountered someone and I wasn't being that, there was some lie. I was either pretending to be something or something wasn't. There was something in the space, either with them or myself. But I had a new demand for myself to be me no matter where I was at. And that was something that even showed up at work. I worked for a wine company, and I worked, I could easily work with, some of the executives or managers, and then at the same time I was out working with the vineyard workers. And one of the things that I noticed, and a lot of people acknowledged like my ease to just flow within both groups, and I thought, oh, well, I'm being me, and that doesn't change. And it's not like that, since I'm me and it doesn't matter who you are, I'm going to be me, not from that energy, but it's like I'm actually going to be with people where I'm honoring myself, honoring them. I'm also, grateful and willing to hear them as I would a vineyard worker from a manager, no different. And that space is like the new demand I had for me in the world and with all the people in my life. So fast forward here 6 years, I met someone. So it was funny. You and I were talking a little before the show started, and I was like, right. Yeah, there are new adventures to be had now.
Yes. So how are you making the relationship work with all the travel?
Well, it's interesting because the point of view I had and people had and projected, and it's like there's no way you can have a relationship. So first of all, I invite all the listeners. It's like, what have you defined a relationship has to be? Mm-hmm. Even if you look at, like, if you're going to have a relationship, let's just say how many minutes or how many hours do you have to spend with that person a day for it to qualify as a relationship? And, the sense of, the distance, it's like, also begin to ask, like, wow, just because they're not in front of me does not mean I'm not in a relationship. Mm-hmm. So, and I looked at, and it's so funny because just actually maybe the day before I met this person, someone said, well, forget, you really have a big ego. It's all about you. And I thought, wow, that's a judgment. Okay, good information. And it was just like, because their sense was like, wouldn't you change everything to be with someone? And how many of us believe that in order to be in a relationship, you have to let go of something? And I thought, it actually made me really sad because that is such a big belief that, you have to give something up to make something work. And I remember that day I said, you know what? It's like, okay, like that's their point of view, their belief. Like I'm not going to argue with it. And yet I said, you know what? I know there's someone out there that this would not be a problem. Like they could look beyond it. And literally, I kid you not, the next day, I met someone. And it's interesting because when I met him, it was like, even my sister goes, that's definitely not the type of person I thought you'd be with. Like it doesn't fit the stereotype of who I would date or who I had dated, which I think is another limitation we put on ourselves. Like, what do they have to look like? What do they have to be? And I allowed myself to engage with this person without knowing his last name. So, I wasn't Googling him. I wasn't out searching him. I did not know his last name. I did not know what he did for work. And yet there was a space that he was. There was a kindness. There was a curiosity in his world. There was like where you're having these conversations with someone and there's questions, we're both questions and answering on both ends and you can go all night kind of sense. And I thought, okay, something's different here. And so if you have any questions about that, but it's been this discovery, and now I do know his last name. I do know what he does for work, but it's not the determining factor. So for how many people does that begin? And not that you can't have this desire, like I would, desire someone, I don't know, you can have all sorts of things. It's not wrong or bad. But for me, I was asking for someone kind. I was asking for someone that could receive. and someone who was willing to grow. Because I do live a different life, and I am doing ongoing work where I'm willing to change all the time. So one of the greatest gifts he gifted me early on is that he said, I'm not afraid of you, Miss World Traveler. Which I thought it made me chuckle because he actually pinned exactly what I use to keep people away. And so he actually removed that early on.
Cool. So lots to unpack here. And I think that, first of all, asking yourself what is a relationship. And I think that I have seen relationships work in so many different ways. I have seen long-distance relationships where the couple lives in two different states, 4 hours apart, a plane apart, and it works. They see each other. They make up, how it's going to work. And so it doesn't have to look a certain way. There are people who live together who don't get along, and so that's, it's not the close proximity that makes a relationship. Also, dating outside your type is usually what brings you love, because, as I say, love comes in a surprise package. It's what you don't expect. I think that makes it also feel kind of magical and take you by surprise. And he had the elements of kindness, curiosity, a great communicator. That was what connected you, not his job or his last name or where he lived. And with the right foundation, you can make relationships work. And most of us start with the wrong foundation, right? We start with a weak foundation.
Well, yes, definitely. And there's a couple of things, that, through Access Consciousness that I've heard, there's, awesome things within a lot of the classes, but I started to look at something what we call a winner, a loser, and a no count. And they're just terms that were given to how we search for people in a way. So oftentimes we're looking for that winner that tends to meet our standard, right? They look this way, they, whatever it is, And I started to notice what my winner type was. And if you start to look at, it's like, what's your winner type like? It's usually the person that, for us women, the man that matches whatever we think it should look like, but it's usually not a very kind man. It's usually not the one that's going to be caring for you. But somehow we buy that if we're dating them or we end up with them, then we've won.
Yep.
And so I started to look at that. And it's like, okay, so what else is possible here that I've never considered? And then the no count, he's the one that if you started to date him, he would totally let go of anything in his life that you would become the center and all that in his life. And you're like, no, I'm sorry, that's the loser. The loser's the one that if you started to date him, he would let go of everything and you would be it. And as women too, and I think a lot of powerful women, that becomes smothering and too much. And you're like, oh, stop, please.
Yep.
So you don't, the winner where they're not that caring, the loser where they totally leave everything and you become everything to them. It's like, and then the no count is the one we usually don't consider. They're the one, it's like, oh, yeah, he's a really nice guy. And, where he doesn't fit that standard you could have of the one that you would date, but he's got the most caring and kindness for you. And it's usually the ones that we dismiss as no count. So I actually started to ask, I go, universe, please show me, who are the no counts? Because I want to get a sense of what that is. Like I hadn't been willing. And I remember the first gentleman that I went out, among the kindness and the gratitude in his world for me, I'm all, wow, I've been missing out here. I did not know this existed. So if there are people out there, for men and women, it's like start asking, who are the no counts? And these are the people that are not going to let go of their life. They're still going to create their life and choose what they enjoy. And they're just going to have caring and gratitude for you and enjoy having you be a part of their life, which is so very different.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And I think people do that winner type, which is usually the bad boy and the guy with the great job, and I won him over. And so much of this is programmed into us from a very long time ago. But I want to get back to like the definition of limitation, and then go back to the topic of today, which is 3 tips to eliminate them. So let's just to define limitation. I think you have already, but just to get it clear here.
Yeah, well, limitation is anything that you've decided or concluded that keeps you from choosing anything different. And that's how I look at it. A limitation is anything you've concluded or decided, because whatever you conclude or decide, it's going to be so. And that keeps you from actually creating anything new or different.
Interesting. Okay, so it's that set mindset, that fixed way of looking at things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's and beginning to question that can actually begin. When we talk about tips, but beginning to question your limitations, and this is like, what do I believe a relationship is? That what have I decided a relationship has to be, look like, sound like? Because oftentimes those are the limitations we have put in place because that's all we've seen. So when you begin to question them, you begin to crack them open to maybe beginning to go, okay, that might not be true for me actually.
Right. So that's one step, is to start to question, what does the relationship really look like, and how can I see it differently? So what's another tip to eliminate the limitations?
So the other tip is to begin to look at these. It's interesting. One of the things that we're often searching for someone to fill a void. Mm-hmm. And so the other thing, when you're willing to go beyond your limitations, it's like, okay, am I willing to be, like once you kind of work through all what you thought a relationship should be, and you realize, okay, what is it really that I would enjoy? What are the, say, 5 elements of a relationship that I would enjoy? And for me, I'd mentioned, but it was this caring and this kindness and this level of receiving, and that, okay, it's like, do I have that for me? So begin to ask if you actually have that for you. Mm-hmm. Do you have the kindness with you? Are you grateful for you? And are you willing to receive? Because it's once you have that with you, then having someone else in your world is adding to that. It's not filling the void.
Mhm. Yeah. We got bad messages about people completing us back in the day. That was a terrible
those wonderful
thing.
Movies.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had a first session with a client this morning, and we were talking about how she's experienced men and what she really wants. And so it's back to that question: is that who you are for yourself? You want to.
Do we have a few minutes? Can I share a slight story where I got this awareness of that?
Sure.
Because I was also searching all my life, from my parents giving me the love, and that I had gone to this yoga festival and had started out by getting a massage, and I remember like having my intention into the massage, and it's like I'd love to receive a message, and there I was, and like certain thoughts would come in. It's like, no, not that. What else? And all of a sudden, it's like this whisper of a voice came through, and it was, "You are loved." And then I started to like tear up, and I thought, then I got all these energies of people in my life. You are loved. And as I received it, and I received the energies of, okay, there's my mother and my father, there's people, friends, and you are loved. And then all of a sudden, there was a switch, and it was, you are loved. Mm-hmm. And I thought, and then it was almost like everyone I had already seen that supposedly was like had loved me, or from you are loved, had fallen away. And it not like I wasn't grateful for that, but it didn't matter because I was loved. So there's this sense that we're searching for what we call love, and yet, maybe that's where we sometimes get confused, because what is the definition of love? And if we could begin to get sense, it's like, what are we, and what do we add to the world? What do we add to a relationship? What do we add to our own lives? That if we have more of that, then having anyone in or out of our lives, it's not a huge significance. It's just the joy of adding more to our lives. But you always have you. So, So just there was a sense of something
that's a great
there.
Story.
Like,
and it's interesting because so many people end up in multiple relationships repeating the same patterns because they don't do this work and they haven't filled their own void, and they're waiting for somebody to do it for them. And so when you do that, and so it's a great way to look at it. You are loved, you are loved, and for a lot of people that's hard to hear. Like, you got teary.
Oh yes, and that's the level of receiving. Like, we're like, are you actually willing to receive? When you do have a kind person that's like, hey, what can I do to help? It's like, how many of us, and and speaking to the women out there, many of us have become like, I can do it all on my own. I'm very self-sufficient, in so many different ways. And yet, what is it to actually receive simply from a man saying, can I help you with that suitcase? Or, what can I do to help? Can I turn on your car and warm it up for you? And you're like, it's not required. You you can do it, but yet, like, we're cutting off actually receiving the kindness and the gift of men.
Yes.
By
it can
doing
be
it
emasculating to men.
Yes.
It's funny how I had this conversation with Rebecca Hulse, who I was speaking with you about recently, before the show. She's on my other podcast, the Woman of Value podcast, and she was saying how she was at this event through Access Consciousness, and there was a man who was offering her all these things. Can I make you coffee? He wanted to open the door, the car door. And she was like, no, I got this. And then she realized that she really needs to start receiving, because he said to her, I want to give you these things. And it's hard for so many women. It's like we're so used to saying, I got this. Mm-hmm. And one of the best things we can hear from a man is, I got this, right? So be willing to accept and receive. It's an important part of love, receiving.
Yes, and that the willingness, and also for the men, it's like, if you do have strong women in your life, it's like, also, being grateful for the strong women, but even asking, hey, what can I do to help?
Yeah.
And not be attached that it be anything. But even that question, it's like, may begin to open a possibility where they come up with something. So, yeah, it definitely is something that I think maybe more women of us need to practice. It's like, are you willing just to pause a bit to receive? And it's not a wrongness, but, we've taught that we've had to work real hard to go throughout the world, and maybe if we changed our receiving level, it would, something new would show up. Yeah.
Yeah, which would be exciting. So we have two of the tips to eliminate limitations. Did you have a third one? So the first was begin to question, what does a relationship look like and sound like? And then ask yourself, what is it that I would enjoy? And you name 5 elements of a relationship that you would enjoy, and ask if you have that for you. What's another tip that you can share?
And the other tip is going to be to be in an ongoing question. So with everything that shows up for you, and this is where, it's so interesting, because we have these, I would say these, beliefs that we bought as true and real, and thoughts that come in and judgments that come in, and to begin to ask, so truth, does this belong to me? Because it's one of, as thoughts, feelings, and emotions come up, we are so aware of so much. We've picked up so much from family. We pick up so much from friends, and we're ongoing inundated with TV, all sorts of stuff, that the question alone, truth, does this belong to me, might give you the relief. If it gives you this space where you kind of take this fresh breath and go, then it's not yours. Then add, okay, what's true for me here? What would I like to create? And this last tip is this ongoing muscle to continue to be into question. Somehow we think we get to a point where it's all done. You were talking about, the last first date. What if you can be in that last first date all the time.
Mhm.
It reminds me of the movie, the 50 First Dates. That sense like every day was a new day. And what if every day can be that? And the tool that I get to have that is to be in question of everything that shows up and then ask, okay, what would I like to create? You have the 10 seconds to create something new every 10 seconds. So what would you like to create in this relationship? What would you like to create today? We do have choice, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how many choices we make during the day too. I once did some research on how many choices we make throughout our day, and when you become really conscious that you're choosing, it changes your choices often. So even, do I want to eat this or this? Do I want to turn left or right? Do I want to take a walk in this direction or that direction? Those are the simpler decisions, and then we have bigger ones like, is this work lighting me up? Is this part of my work not working anymore, and why? What can I do to have something better, to make it work better? So it's very empowering to know that you're a choice, and I think a lot of people think they are not.
Yes. And I just want to acknowledge everyone, whether your relationship's not working, you're looking to end one or start a new one, or maybe even to start a new one with you, like it does take courage. Like really acknowledge the courage. We're bombarded with so much of what relationships should be, which a lot of it is fantasy and make-believe. And yet it's like, it does take courage to begin to ask, what do I know? What would I like? What actually lights me up? Like you said, that lightness of, I enjoy, in these 10 seconds, I'm, grateful for this person. I'm enjoying me. Like, what else would I like to choose? So acknowledge the courage to choose what works for you and to be on the ongoing question, how does it get any better than this? And see what else shows up.
So that's a great tip to end with, so that people can stay in curiosity and questions, and also have self-compassion for the courage it takes to ask these questions, to really push the status quo a little bit.
Exactly. And I wonder what new things people will show up.
Yeah.
Like I get that's the adventure of living. It's like, wonder what will show up today. What would I like to ask for? Like, what if every day you could start your day going, wow, what would it be like to add more happy people to my life today? And then just notice throughout your day, do more happy people show up? It's like, what if we had the power to actually ask and receive? And you could ask for what you truly desire. And that's the beginning to almost rediscover what's true for you, because then you get to ask,
Pretty awesome.
and create. Yeah.
Yeah. So, when you said before, and then we do have to come to a close, but, this kind of brings me back full circle to the people who told you how to give up something in order to make a relationship work. And I think the way I define that is we have to give up having to control every aspect of it. We have to give up not changing any aspect of your life. So let's say some habits or, some things that are not as important to you, but never to give up the things that really matter, never to give up your values, the things that matter most to you. And I think there's a difference. It's okay to give up a habit. It's okay to give up what time you go to sleep and to be a little less rigid about that if you can. Right? So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, and what if it wasn't giving up? It's like, okay, what can I be or do different here? Because I think most people, when, it's like I imagine that 5-year-old, you got to give up that candy, your teeth are going to rot. He's going to scream and shout.
Right.
What do you mean? So it's like, okay, so, because that's, like if nothing's right or wrong, it's like what's going to work? Like what are you desiring to create? And this is, in all relationships, what do you desire to create and what can you be and do different? Again, there's a beingness of you being something, an energy, different energy, the way you're going to respond to things or and it's also okay. What do you need to do different? So say it is your sleeping, patterns are off. I work with a company that's worldwide, so I can easily jump on a meeting at midnight.
Yeah.
Wake up at 3 and I'm happy to get up and work. So, I am gonna be considerate, and that's when you're being considerate of the other person, you have gratitude for them. Hold them in regard, then you're going to make maybe choices, but it's going to be out of your caring for them and consideration, not an obligation to let something go. So it's like, oh, wait, he's got to be at work up in the morning, I'm going to actually go to the next room, or I'm going to go to the living room, or I choose not to get on the computer. But that's out of the caring and kindness, not out of the obligation and giving something up.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. Obligation, bad. Be a choice. It's like, it's when it's a different energy when it comes from obligation. That was one of my biggest shifts as I got divorced. Was I realized how much I had done out of obligation in my life, and that I was done with that, and I wanted to help other people get out of obligation and really start tuning into the choices that they make that light them up, that make them feel like they're feeding their soul rather than draining their souls.
Yeah.
So,
and
good stuff. Did you want to say one more thing?
Thank you, Sandy. I just wanted to say thank you for bringing this out into the world, because these conversations aren't very easy, to have. I told you I had been single for 6 years, and noticing here towards the end, it's like, oh, I'm actually avoiding this area, because it's probably one of the areas that I would say I don't have the greatest, like I have functioned so much, or I've been dysfunctional. And so, beginning to go, all right, I'm going to give this a try and see all the things that come up and use the tools myself. Like, what is it that I desire? What would I like to create? So you bringing on different speakers with this topic, I'm so, so grateful. And there's incredible books by two incredible facilitators in Access Consciousness that started my curiosity if I truly wanted a relationship. And it's called, what is this? I can't think of the title. Do you want to truth? Do you want a relationship? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name, but it's by Simone Millicent and
okay. We've had her on
Brendan
the show.
Watt.
She's actually going to be on my other show also soon. Yeah, she and her partner, right after they split, they were both on my show.
The relationship.
Think of the name.
One. Yeah, relationship.
Relationship.
Do you want one?
Right. Yeah.
And what was so great, because that began the question, do I want one? And I got like a yes. I'm like, what? It's been 6 years, and I thought, because the other question, if you've been single for a long time, you might not want one. And that's okay too. Like, where is it okay not to want a relationship? And if you do, also, being willing to acknowledge it does require work. You are, and so for me, it's this. All right, what am I haven't been willing to look at that I can look at now, and not like this person's perfect and I'm perfect, but it's like, all right, stuff's going to come up, and willingness to ongoingly be in the question and what's working and what else can we choose.
Yeah.
So lots of great tools out there for creating new relationships.
Totally, and maybe I'll link to that show in the show notes. Thank you so much, Sylvia. Thank you for being on the show, for really sharing such wonderful information with our audience on how they can really transform their lives. Really appreciate.
Thank you, and happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you. You too. And for everybody who's listening, thank you for listening in. And if you love our show, please rate and review it wherever you listen to podcasts. iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, everywhere. And happy holidays, and don't forget about your last first date. Join our group, and we hope you go on your last first date very soon. Have a great day.